Single dad saved a woman from a mugging hours later. He learned she was the CEO he'd been emailing. The city was still wet from the afternoon rain, glistening under the amber glow of streetlights. Jack Nolan pulled into the gas station, his hands trembling slightly as he held the phone to his ear. The nurse on the other end had just said 6 words no parent ever wants to hear. "Your daughter's had an accident. She's stable, but you should come. Lily, his little girl, 7 years old, a tangle of freckles and wild curiosity." Jack's heart kicked against his ribs as he yanked the keys from the ignition. He didn't ask for details, didn't need them. She was in the hospital. That was enough. He bolted toward his truck, half-empty coffee sloshing over the lid as he fumbled to throw it aside. Every second felt like punishment. Every red light a cruel joke. The GPS said 23 minutes. He knew the shortcut could make it in 16. If traffic was light, it wasn't. The night was heavy with that quiet tension city folks knew too well, something always just around the corner. Jack cut through side streets and alleyways like a man possessed trying to breathe through the panic tightening around his chest. Then he heard it. A scream. Sharp, panicked human. It came from the alley just ahead, a narrow slice of concrete between 2 brick buildings. Jack slammed on the brakes. His headlights caught a flicker of motion. A woman stumbled backward, her purse ripped from her hands. A man, hooded, lunged at her. Jack's knuckles went white on the steering wheel. 3 seconds. That was all he had. In one direction, the hospital, his daughter, his everything. In the other, a stranger in danger right now. He could drive past. Call 911. No one would blame him. Lily needed him. But before the thought even finished forming, Jack was out of the truck. He ran. "Hey," he shouted, gravel crunching under his boots. The mugger spun, startled. The woman, dazed, crumpled to the pavement. Jack didn't think he moved. Tackle, grab, shove. Years of football and construction work fueled his momentum. The man swung a blade. Jack caught the glint just before it grazed his shoulder. Pain flared hot. He didn't stop. He got the guy down, wrestled the knife away, and shouted into the night until the man scrambled to his feet and bolted, disappearing into the darkness. Breathing hard, Jack turned to the woman. She was shaking, but conscious, cradling her wrist. "You okay?" he asked, crouching beside her. She nodded, mutely, eyes wide. Elegant, late 30s, maybe wearing a soaked trench coat and heels that had no business in a neighborhood like this. There was something sharp in her features, refined. But now she looked stunned, vulnerable. I didn't see him," she said, voice raw. "He came out of nowhere." Jack offered his hand. She took it hesitantly. "I've got to go," he said, checking the time. "Can you walk? There's a diner around the corner. I'll call someone to come help. I'll be okay," she cut in. "Thank you. Really? But Jack was already turning. Blood was seeping through his shirt. Lily was waiting. He didn't look back. The hospital smelled like antiseptic, and time slowed as Jack sprinted through the sliding doors. The nurse at the front desk pointed him to pediatrics without asking for ID. Maybe it was the blood. Maybe it was the wild look in his eyes. He found Lily curled in a hospital bed, her head wrapped in a white bandage, cheeks flushed with sleep. She took a fall down the steps at school, the doctor explained. A mild concussion and a bruised rib. Nothing broken. She's stable now. Jack exhaled like he hadn't done in years. He pulled a chair beside her bed and took her hand gently, careful not to wake her. Her little fingers, so small against his scarred knuckles, twitched in her sleep. "I'm here, baby," he whispered. "Daddy's here." The adrenaline crashed out of him all at once, leaving only pain and exhaustion. His shoulder throbbed, but he didn't care. He watched her chest rise and fall, and for a long time he didn't move. It wasn't until hours later in the quiet of the hospital corridor that Jack noticed the blood had soaked through his shirt sleeve entirely. A nurse insisted he be checked out. The cut was shallow, needed a few stitches, but it would heal. "You're lucky it didn't go deeper," the doctor told him. Jack didn't feel lucky. He felt worn, like the world had taken another piece of him. but he would have done it again, 100 times over. As the dawn crept in through the hospital windows, Jack checked his phone. A missed call, no voicemail, and one new email. Subject, Warden Corp. Interview invitation. Message. Dear Mr. Nolan, we've reviewed your application and would like to schedule an interview. Please report to the 31st floor at 9:00 a.m. today. We look forward to meeting you in person. Jack blinked. Warden Corp. He had sent that resume nearly a month ago. Nothing. Not even a rejection. And now, today, of all days they wanted to meet. He glanced at Lily. Still asleep, peaceful. He checked the time. 7:12 a.m. He had 2 hours. His shoulders still burned and his shirt looked like it had lost a fight with a lawnmower. But for the first time in weeks, something flickered inside him. A door creaked open. A maybe. He stood, slowly kissed Lily's forehead and whispered, Daddy's got one more thing to do today. I'll be back before lunch. He didn't know yet that the woman in the alley would be waiting for him on the 31st floor, and she wouldn't be thanking him. She'd be interviewing him. Jack stood in front of the towering glass building, his reflection a contrast to the polished marble behind it. His button-down shirt, freshly laundered in a rush, clung uncomfortably to the fresh stitches beneath it. The pain in his shoulder pulsed gently with each breath, a reminder of the choice he'd made the night before. He didn't regret it, but he did wish he had a better jacket. The security guard at the front desk barely looked up when Jack gave his name. A printed badge was handed over, and a curt gesture sent him toward the elevator banks. 31st floor, the guard said. Jack stepped inside the elevator, smoothed his hair with the palm of his hand, and inhaled deeply. He'd been in buildings like this once, back when he wore a blazer to work, back when meetings had catered lunches and people looked him in the eye. Now the collar of his shirt itched in unfamiliar ways, and he couldn't stop thinking about Lily sleeping alone in that hospital bed. You're doing this for her. The elevator chimed. The doors slid open into a floor too quiet to be busy, too pristine to feel lived in. He stepped out his boots, making soft thuds on the carpet. A receptionist, all angles and elegance, looked up from her monitor and smiled faintly. Mr. Nolan, she asked. That's me, he nodded. The CEO will see you now. Jack blinked. Sorry, did you say CEO? She stood. Yes, Ms. Ward prefers to handle special hires herself. Right this way. Jack's pulse spiked. CEOs didn't do interviews. Not for field engineers. Not for men who'd emailed resumes into the void. He followed her down a glass-lined corridor, each step echoing louder in his ears than the last. The assistant knocked gently, opened the frosted door, and stepped aside. Inside, behind a sleek black desk, was the woman from the alley. Jack froze. She was dressed differently, power in every line of her navy suit, her dark hair pulled back sharp against the pale backdrop. But there was no mistaking her. The frightened, rain-soaked woman he'd pulled from the pavement just hours ago now sat poised, composed, and apparently in charge of a company he'd spent weeks begging for a chance to join. Her gaze flicked up and locked onto his. For a beat, neither of them moved. Then she stood. Mr. Nolan, she said calmly, her tone practiced and neutral. Thank you for coming. Jack nodded stiffly. Ms. Ward. She gestured to the chair across from her desk. He hesitated, then sat. The assistant closed the door behind them. The silence stretched. Finally, Elena spoke. I wasn't expecting to see you this morning. Likewise, Jack set his voice lower than usual. She didn't apologize, didn't smile, just studied him as though he were a riddle she hadn't figured out yet. You're the same man who submitted designs for our South Side initiative last month, she asked. Yes, Jack replied. I sent a proposal for a cost-effective plumbing system using salvaged components. Never heard back. Elena clicked her mouse. I reviewed it this morning. It's unconventional. Creative. Too creative perhaps for our procurement team. But I saw potential. He nodded, unsure what to say. Your resume shows you used to run your own engineering firm. I did, before. Everything changed. Another pause. "I'm sorry," she said finally, and there was the first hint of something real in her voice. "About what happened last night. I didn't get the chance to thank you." "I didn't do it for thanks," Jack said evenly. "I heard someone in trouble. You were on your way to the hospital." "Yes." Elena's lips pressed together. She looked down for a moment as if to compose herself, then said, "How's your daughter?" The question caught him off guard. "She's okay. She hit her head. Just a concussion." "She's lucky," Elena murmured. Jack leaned forward slightly. "Why am I here?" Her eyes flicked back to his. "Because I want to offer you a job." Silence. "You don't know anything about me," he said. "I know enough," she replied. "I know that most people in the city would have kept driving last night. I know that your designs show not only technical skill, but compassion. Every element is built around access, affordability, community impact. I know you've been trying to get back on your feet and that you've done it without cutting corners." She stood and walked to the window behind her. "We're expanding our community development program. I need someone who understands what it means to build for people, not just for profit. I think that someone might be you." Jack stared at her. Part of him wanted to laugh. Part of him wanted to cry. He'd come here expecting bureaucracy, a quick rejection. Not this. "What's the catch?" he asked quietly. Elena turned back around. There was something in her expression now, guarded but vulnerable. "The catch is that I need to trust you, and I need you to trust me." He stood slowly. "I don't know if I'm there yet." She nodded once. "Fair enough," then softer. "I know you don't want charity." "No," Jack said. "I don't. This isn't that. This is recognition. For work you've already done and the kind of person you are." Jack's hand curled loosely at his side. The bandage beneath his sleeve itched. "I'll take the job," he said. Their eyes met again. "But I'm not making promises I can't keep." Elena smiled just barely. "Neither am I." As Jack stepped back into the elevator, heart-pounding, he caught his reflection in the mirrored wall. Tired, bruised, stitched up, but maybe stepping into that alley hadn't broken him. Maybe it had saved something. Not just for her, but for him too. The construction site was a gutted warehouse on the south side of the city, a skeleton of steel beams and broken windows wrapped in caution tape and possibility. Jack stood just inside the main entrance, the morning wind sweeping dust past his boots. This was it, his new assignment. Warden Corp's community redevelopment program had just broken ground here, aiming to convert the forgotten building into a multi-purpose community center, shelters job, training rooms, child care. All buzzwords Jack had heard before. Usually they fizzled into glossy brochures and empty promises. But something about Elena Ward made him think maybe this time was different. Maybe. "Hey, you Nolan!" Jack turned to see a woman in a high-vis vest and a skeptical stare. She had salt and pepper hairlines at the corners of her eyes and the posture of someone who'd spent her life proving she belonged in rooms where no one wanted to let her in. "Yeah," Jack said. "Jack Nolan." She nodded, unimpressed. "Linda Hooper, site supervisor. I was told you'd be joining the team. You a clipboard guy or a get-your-hands-dirty guy?" Jack smiled. Little of both depending on the day. "Good answer," she grunted. "Grab a helmet. We're behind schedule and the architect's drawings are, let's say, optimistic." As she turned, Jack caught a faint smile on her face. By noon, his shirt was damp, his shoulder aching under the bandage and his palms dusted with grit. And yet for the first time in years, Jack felt good. Useful. He adjusted the layout of a plumbing system that had been over-engineered on paper using salvaged copper pipe from an old HVAC system he found on site. Linda watched with narrowed eyes, then gave a curt nod of approval. "You're efficient," she said, leaning against a steel beam. "I've had practice. I used to run my own firm." She raised an eyebrow. "Used to long story." Linda didn't push. She simply handed him a bottle of water and walked off to yell at the electrician for coiling conduit like spaghetti. Jack looked around the half-demolished space. No walls yet, just the shape of something better. He liked the potential. At 3 p.m., a car pulled up. Sleek, black, out of place. Elena stepped out. Dressed down today, still elegant but more accessible. Jeans, a cream blouse, flats. Her hair was in a low ponytail and she squinted in the sun as she walked across the gravel. Jack wiped his hands on a rag and met her near the trailer. "Didn't expect to see you here," he said. "I try to check in on major projects," she replied, "especially ones that involve people I personally hired." He nodded, guarded but polite. "How's the shoulder?" she asked. "Healing." Slowly. They stood in silence a beat too long, the wind tossing a piece of paper across the lot. "You redesigned part of the plumbing?" she asked. Jack gestured toward the blueprints pinned on a corkboard. "The original plan routed water through a system that costs twice what's necessary. I adjusted it to use reclaimed materials and reduce long-term maintenance costs." Elena studied the sketches. "How much savings are we talking? 80,000 over 5 years?" She turned to him. "And you just did that?" Jack shrugged. "Figured that's why I'm here." Elena looked like she wanted to say more, but instead she simply smiled. A real one this time. Not polite, not corporate. Then she did something unexpected. She took off her blazer and rolled up her sleeves. "Mind if I take a look inside?" Jack blinked. "You want a tour, I want to understand the work. Not just read about it in quarterly reports." Linda walked up, eyebrows raised. "You know the CEO's poking around your rebar, right?" "She brought her own boots," Jack said. Elena grinned. "And gloves." They spent the next hour walking the site. Jack showed her the revised schematics, introduced her to the day laborers, and translated engineering jargon into something close to English. At one point, she crouched beside a stack of bricks and traced her fingers over the rough texture. "I used to come to places like this as a kid," she said softly. "My mom volunteered at shelters. I hated the smell of old coffee and linoleum, but I loved how different people looked once they had a place to be." Jack looked at her differently then, not as the woman he saved, not even as the CEO, but as someone who remembered. "Most people at your level," he said, "don't care what the bricks feel like. Most people at my level haven't had to start over." Jack tilted his head. "You started over." A shadow passed across her eyes, and for a moment he thought she might actually tell him something real. But she just smiled, thin and tired. Everyone has a beginning they don't talk about. As the sun dipped low, painting the sky with oranges and golds, Elena stood at the edge of the site and looked back at the building. "What do you see when you look at this?" she asked. Jack took a long breath. "I see a place where someone might come in broken, and leave a little less so." She nodded. "That's the goal." Then she turned to him. "Do you think you'll stay on this project, I mean?" Jack considered it. "I'm not here because I was rescued," he said slowly. "I'm here because I want to build something that matters. If that's still the offer, I'll stay." Elena extended her hand. "It is." He took it. That night, as Jack returned to the hospital, Lily was awake coloring in a notebook with crayons someone from the nurses' station had given her. "Daddy," she said, smiling, "look what I made." He took the paper. It was a drawing stick, figures in hard hats smiling in front of a tall building with a garden on the roof. "That's you," she pointed, "building something big." Jack felt something warm bloom in his chest. "I like that," he said. "You think I can do it?" Lily looked up with all the faith in the world. "You always fix things, Daddy." And for the first time in years, Jack believed maybe she was right. The next morning began with sunlight pouring through the window of the hospital room, soft and golden. Jack sat in the armchair beside Lily's bed, half asleep with his boots still on his head, tilted at an awkward angle. The quiet beeping of the monitors had faded into background noise like a rhythm he no longer noticed. Lily stirred. Daddy Jack jolted awake, rubbed his eyes, and leaned forward. "Hey, sweetheart." Her smile was small but full of mischief. "You snore." "I do not." You do, she whispered, clearly delighted to be winning this argument. I drew a picture of it. He laughed, ruffling her hair gently. You feel okay. She nodded. The nurse gave me apple juice and let me have 2 straws. Jack leaned in with mock seriousness. 2 straws? You must be very important. I am, she said proudly, then grew thoughtful. Are you going back to work today? Jack hesitated. Just for a few hours. Linda needs help with the new building. Is it for kids? Some parts, yeah. A place for kids and grown-ups who don't have homes, or jobs, or people who need a place to start over. Lily was quiet, then asked, Is that like starting a new story? Jack blinked. Yeah, exactly like that. She looked at him, then her eyes big and wondering. Daddy. Did you fix your story too? The question hung in the air like breath on cold glass. Jack felt his throat tighten. He didn't know how to answer. He thought of the years after the collapse of his company, after Vanessa Lily's mother had passed and everything he thought he knew about safety and planning crumbled. There were no perfect lines in his story, no neat endings. Just detours, days where getting out of bed had been the biggest victory. He reached out and took her hand. I'm working on it, kiddo. That afternoon, Lily was discharged. Jack brought her home to their small rental apartment, 2 bedrooms worn but clean and decorated with crayon art on the fridge. He set her up on the couch with a stack of books and a promise to be back by dinner. At the construction site, the air smelled like sawdust and diesel. Jack arrived to find Linda and the crew gathered around a stack of plans arguing about measurements for the outdoor staircase. I told them the angle was off, Linda said, handing Jack a tape measure before he could speak. He smiled. Nice to see you, too. They worked through the problem together, adjusting the design and salvaging materials to meet code. Jack felt the rhythm returning problem-solution purpose. There was something sacred in building with your hands and watching something emerge where there had been only rubble. Later, while waiting for a delivery truck, Jack noticed Elena standing by the chain-link fence speaking with a young mother and 2 children. The kids wore oversized jackets, clinging shyly to their mother's legs. Jack wandered over. She's asking if the center will have a daycare, Elena said as Jack approached. Says she wants to go back to school but can't if she doesn't have anyone to watch the little ones. Jack looked at the woman and smiled. That's exactly the kind of story this place is meant to change. Elena turned to him. You know, I spent the first part of my career designing towers for hedge fund firms and downtown law offices. Spaces full of glass and marble that nobody actually touched. She looked back at the children. This feels different. Jack studied her. There was something in her voice earnest, unguarded. He recognized it. It was the same look he'd seen in the mirror when Lily was born, the moment you realized your work had to mean more than just a paycheck. You ever build something for someone you never met? Jack asked. All the time, Elena said, but it's never felt like enough. Until now. That evening, Jack invited Elena to stop by his place. For a real tour, he said, joking of the humble engineer's castle. To his surprise, she accepted. Lily met her at the door, wearing one of Jack's old t-shirts like a dress and a tiara made from pipe cleaners. You must be Elena Lilly, said solemnly. I am, Elena replied, crouching down to Lily's level. And you must be the boss around here. Correct. Lily nodded. Would you like some invisible tea? We're out of juice. Elena played along, smiling gently as Lily served from a plastic teapot. Jack watched from the kitchen, wiping his hands on a towel and trying not to look like he was staring. But he was. And something in him stirred. She didn't look like a CEO now. She looked like someone trying to remember what being human felt like. After Lily fell asleep, they sat on the balcony, the night quiet except for distant city sounds. She asked me this morning if I'd fixed my story, Jack said. Elena looked over. What did you say? I told her I'm still working on it. She nodded, silent for a while. I had a sister, she said suddenly. Claire, 2 years younger. We grew up close, but when our parents passed, there was disagreement about the company, about money. She walked away. I haven't spoken to her in 7 years. Jack waited, knowing better than to interrupt. I've spent so long trying to prove I was strong enough to run everything Elena said, that I didn't need help, that I didn't need anyone. But last week, when that man came at me in that alley, I didn't think about titles or status. I just thought this might be how it ends, and no one knows who I really am anymore. She turned to Jack. But you didn't walk away. He swallowed. Sometimes the things we don't plan are the only parts that save us. They sat in silence again. Not awkward, but meaningful. Above them, a single star broke through the haze, and below, in a city that rarely paused long enough to notice grace when it passed by, 2 people bruised rebuilding began quietly to heal. The following week settled into a rhythm that Jack hadn't felt in years. Mornings were spent preparing Lily's lunch and walking her to the school bus. Afternoons were consumed by concrete blueprints and the kind of conversations that had once made him feel alive, conversations about function utility, how design could serve people, not just impress investors. Elena became a regular presence at the construction site. Not in a performative press release kind of way, but as someone who listened, who walked the space like she was trying to understand its heartbeat. She carried a notebook and scribbled furiously, sometimes asking questions about things no executive ever cared about. "You think we can fit a rooftop garden here?" she asked one morning, gesturing at the steel framing above the main entrance. Jack squinted up. "Structurally, yes. Logistically, depends on how ambitious you're feeling." "I'm always ambitious," she said, "and stubborn." "I'm the younger sibling," she replied almost offhand. Jack glanced at her. "You never talk about your family." She paused. "That's because I try not to." The silence between them stretched just enough to make Jack feel the temperature change. Elena didn't offer more, and he didn't push, but something shifted in her eyes like glass that had just started to crack. That night, Jack lay awake in bed staring at the ceiling fan. The low whir filled the quiet, but his thoughts raced. He couldn't shake the image of Elena's face when he asked about her family. He recognized that look. It was the same one he'd worn for years every time someone asked about his wife. Some wounds didn't scar over. They just learned to live below the surface waiting. 2 days later, a delivery error set the site schedule back several hours. Jack offered to reroute some of the logistics himself, meeting with a local salvage contractor who'd been helping them secure eco-friendly materials. While sorting through the invoice records, Jack's eyes caught something that didn't make sense. A name. A familiar one. Silverstone Development Group. It was listed as a consultant entity for the original proposal of the community project before Elena took over the CEO role. But Jack knew that name better than most. It was the shell company used to force his old firm into bankruptcy 5 years ago. The air left his lungs. He clicked deeper. Cross-referenced the name. There it was. Silverstone was majority-owned by Warden Corp at the time. And not just that the board of directors included someone with a name Jack hadn't seen in years. Edwin Ward. Elena's father. He stared at the screen like it had slapped him. His hands trembled. He felt something inside him collapse not loudly but in a quiet, devastating way like a bridge giving out in the dark. He had tried so hard not to look back. He had forced himself to believe that maybe for once the universe had decided to bring something good. But now he wondered if all of this Elena the job, the project had been part of some carefully constructed redemption campaign. Did she know? Did she bring him here to ease her conscience or worse? Was it guilt by association? That evening, Jack didn't go straight home. He sat in his truck for nearly 45 minutes, staring at the windshield, gripping the steering wheel as the city moved around him like a river he couldn't step into. His phone buzzed. "Elena, team. Dinner tomorrow at 6. Hope you and Lily can make it." He didn't reply. Instead, he drove to a quiet street on the outskirts of downtown and parked outside a nondescript townhouse with no nameplate. He hadn't been there in years. He sat there wondering what would have happened if he had fought harder back then, if he'd taken the company to court, if he hadn't walked away when everything fell apart. But then again, he wouldn't have Lily. He wouldn't have become the man who rescued a stranger in an alley without asking for her name. He wasn't angry. He was heartbroken. The next morning at the site, Jack was distant. He kept his head down, his voice measured. Linda noticed. "You look like a man who just found a crack in a foundation he trusted," she said quietly as they reviewed the blueprints. Jack didn't answer. Linda didn't need him to. She waited a moment, then added, "Sometimes it's not the structure. Sometimes it's the story behind it." He nodded. "You ever feel like you were pulled into something without knowing you were a piece of someone else's puzzle all the time?" she said. "But then I remember just because someone else laid the first brick doesn't mean they get to decide what we build with the rest." That night, Jack dropped Lily off at a friend's sleepover and walked toward the Warden Corp building with a single question burning in his chest. Elena met him at the rooftop terrace, the same place she'd proposed the idea of a rooftop garden. She was setting up for the team dinner string lights casting a warm glow over the cement. "Didn't think you'd come," she said, smiling. Jack didn't smile back. He stepped closer. His voice was calm, but beneath it, thunder. "You knew about Silverstone." Her smile faded. She froze. "Elena, did you know?" She looked down. "Yes," she whispered. The silence that followed was suffocating. "You knew what your family did to me," Jack said slowly, every word a weight. "I didn't know when you saved me," she said. "I swear. I didn't know until I saw your name in the interview schedule. Then I checked the files. I found the contracts. My father. He made those decisions. I was just the daughter learning the business, watching from behind a glass wall. I didn't know how to fix it. I didn't know how to tell you. You let me walk back into this building, work on this project. You sat at my table. You spoke to my daughter. I didn't do it out of pity," she said, her voice cracking. "I did it because I saw who you are, and I knew you deserved more than the lies my family built this company on." Jack turned away. The city stretched out below them, so many lights, so many stories. "I can't be part of something that started like that," he said. "Even if it's better now." Elena's voice was a whisper. "You already are." He walked away without another word. She didn't follow. She just stood there, surrounded by everything she'd built and everything she might now lose. The air between them stayed quiet for 3 days. Jack didn't return to the site. He sent no explanation, no apology, just silence. The kind that felt colder than anger, heavier than accusation. It echoed louder than any words Elena could have spoken. Each morning she stood by the window of her office looking out over the skyline, expecting to see him among the workers below. Each afternoon she checked her inbox, half hoping for a message, half dreading it. There was nothing. It was strange how quickly the absence of someone could take up more space than their presence ever had. Jack spent those days working on his truck. Not because it needed repairs, at least not urgently, but because the process of taking something apart and putting it back together gave him clarity. Unlike people machines, made sense. They broke in visible places. They told you when something was wrong. And they didn't lie? He barely spoke even to Lily, except to assure her he was okay. She didn't press. She just climbed into his lap one evening while he sat under the hood, hugged him without a word, and rested her head on his chest. "Are you fixing something again, Daddy?" she murmured. He swallowed hard. Trying to. On the 4th day, Linda showed up at Jack's apartment. She didn't call ahead, just knocked twice, then waited. When Jack opened the door, she was holding a brown paper bag that smelled like greasy Chinese takeout and a look that said she wasn't leaving without being heard. "I didn't come to fix you," she said bluntly. "I came because you're throwing away something that still has nails in it." Jack stepped aside, letting her in. They sat on the couch while Lily read quietly in her room. "You mad at her?" Linda asked, opening the bag. "I'm hurt," Jack admitted. "And I don't know what part of this was ever real." Linda scoffed, stabbing a piece of sesame chicken. "Son, no one fakes that kind of look she had the night you walked out." Jack glanced at her. "You saw her, I didn't have to. It was written all over the walls the next morning. She pulled the proposal to the board, halted 2 other developments tied to her father, said she wouldn't move forward until they were reviewed by independent ethics counsel. Jack blinked. She did what Linda nodded. It's a mess. Investors are mad. Lawyers are twitchy. She doesn't care. She said, and I quote, "If it's built on broken ground, we tear it down and start again." Sound familiar? Jack sat back, stunned. Linda leaned forward. You walked into her life with no idea who she was, and you saved her. And maybe that was fate. But what she's doing now, that's choice. That's her stepping into the mess and trying to be better. Isn't that what you've been doing for the last 5 years? He didn't answer. Linda set down the takeout and stood. You don't have to forgive her. But don't you dare pretend she hasn't earned your respect. That night, Jack stood outside Lily's bedroom door listening to her soft breathing. She had drawn something new on the fridge, a picture of him holding hands with a woman in a blue dress beside a big building with hearts on the roof. Underneath it, in crayon-scrawled letters, "My daddy builds things. So does she." His throat tightened. He didn't sleep much. The next morning, Elena arrived at Warden Corp before sunrise. She hadn't slept either. She walked through the main floor past assistants who avoided her gaze, past directors who whispered behind closed doors. The ripple effects of her decision were everywhere: dropped deals, paused, partnerships, pending investigations. But her conscience was quieter than it had ever been. She stepped onto the 31st floor and opened the blinds in her office. The sky outside was a soft, expectant gray. Then she turned to find Jack standing at her doorway. No knock, just him. He looked tired, worn in a way only the truth could make someone, but also steady, solid. She didn't say anything. He took a step forward, then another. "I built a home," once he said. "For Lily. After her mom died. I poured everything into it. Every board, every bolt. I thought if the walls were strong enough they could hold back everything else." He paused. "But the cracks always come. No matter how well you build, they find you." Elena's eyes shimmered. "What did you do?" "I stopped patching them. Started listening to them instead. That's how you figure out what needs to change." She nodded slowly. "You should have told me the truth, Elena. From the beginning. I know. But I should have asked why you didn't." She took a breath. "Because I was afraid you'd walk away again." Jack stepped closer. "I almost did." A pause, then softer. "I don't want to anymore." She blinked once, twice. "Why?" "Because maybe we both deserve to build something new. Not to erase the past, but to honor what we learned from it." Her eyes searched his. "And what if it breaks again?" Jack smiled faintly. "Then we fix it. Together." Later that morning, they walked the construction site side by side. No labels, no CEO, no employee. Just 2 people flawed, bruised, real walking through steel frames and sawdust ready to build something they both believed in. For the first time in a long time, it didn't feel like starting over. It felt like finally starting right. 2 weeks passed. The site hummed with life again, and so did Jack. He returned to work without drama or announcement, simply showing up early with coffee and rolling up his sleeves like he never left. If anyone noticed the new steadiness in his gaze or the subtle way Elena's eyes lingered on him when she passed, they didn't comment. They didn't need to. Jack wasn't the only one rebuilding something. Elena had traded quiet luxury for sharp edges. She was in the fight now, publicly and unapologetically. Headlines spread quickly. Warden CEO halts legacy projects amid ethics review. Board members were livid, shareholders jittery. But she didn't waver. One morning, she called for a town hall with all Warden Corp employees. Jack stood in the back of the room out of sight watching. She stood alone at the front, no podium, no assistant, just her. "I know many of you have questions," she began. "And frankly, you deserve answers." Silence. She continued. Some of our past projects approved before I stepped into this role were advanced through unethical acquisitions. Some of them impacted small businesses, families, communities. And we were complicit. She looked up, her voice unwavering. I can't undo what was done, but I can decide what kind of company we become now. Jack watched the room shift. Doubt, surprise, and then something harder to name, respect. That night he found her alone in the parking lot, leaning against her car. The sky was still pink with the last edge of sunset. I saw the live stream, he said. She didn't look surprised. Did I sound completely insane? You sounded like someone telling the truth in a room full of people used to hearing something else. She smiled, tired but proud. I didn't realize how heavy it would feel until I let it go. Jack nodded. It shows. In a good way. They stood there a while. Then she turned to him softly. Jack, there's something else I haven't told you. He studied her. Go on. She swallowed. I reached out to my sister. That stopped him. Elena. I didn't do it for closure. I did it because watching you with Lily reminded me that walking away doesn't make the hurt go away. It just makes it lonelier. She took a breath. She hasn't replied. But I'll wait, like someone once waited for me. Jack didn't speak for a moment. Then, you becoming the woman you needed back then. She nodded, and this time her eyes shimmered with something gentler. Maybe I'm also becoming the woman someone else might need now. The next day, Elena arrived at the site with a small gift for Lily, a sketchbook with a sunflower embossed on the front, wrapped in twine. Jack raised an eyebrow as she handed it over. What's this? He asked. Elena smiled. A little thank you. Your daughter sees more than most people twice her age. She reminds me what this project is actually about. Jack read the inscription inside, for Lily. Every time someone tells you stories can't be rewritten, pick up a pencil and prove them wrong. Elena. Later that week, Elena met with the Warden Board of Directors. They expected compromise. They got revolution. She proposed dissolving several long-standing holding companies, including Silverstone Development Group. She offered a new corporate charter with transparency and community oversight embedded in its foundation. I won't run a company that buries its mistakes beneath glass towers, she said. When one board member accused her of self-sabotage, she replied, no. I'm rebuilding, from the ground up, like we should have done years ago. Jack didn't attend the meeting, but he waited outside the boardroom, pacing like a father during a delivery. When Elena emerged, her expression was unreadable. Well, he asked. She exhaled. We lost 3 board members. And she smiled. We gained something better. That weekend, Jack invited Elena and a few of the construction crew to his apartment for dinner. It wasn't much: folding chairs, paper plates, and a crock-pot of chili, but it felt like celebration. Lily played DJ from the couch, blasting old Motown hits that made Linda dance reluctantly until everyone joined in. Jack couldn't remember the last time he saw Elena laugh so freely, head tilted back, eyes bright. At one point, Lily tugged Elena's hand and pulled her into her room. Want to see something? The little girl asked. Elena nodded. Lily pulled out the sketchbook, flipped through pages of buildings with hearts for windows, bridges made of stars, and stick figures holding hands. This one's you, Lily said, pointing. You're helping Daddy fix things. Elena's throat tightened. Is that what you think I'm doing? Lily tilted her head. Aren't you? Elena sat down beside her, brushing a curl from her forehead. I'm trying, she said softly. Sometimes it takes longer than we think. Lily grinned. That's okay. Daddy says the best things take time. That night, when everyone had gone and Lily had fallen asleep, Jack walked Elena out to her car. They stood under the porch light, the air cool with spring. You didn't have to do all this, he said quietly. The board, your father's legacy. It's a lot. I did, she replied, because I needed to stop pretending that healing could happen without confrontation. She looked at him, eyes searching. And you. You make me want to be better. Not for show, not for the company. For me." Jack took her hand. He didn't say anything at first. He didn't need to. Then gently, "You're already getting there." As she drove away that night, Jack stood on the porch a long while. He wasn't sure what tomorrow would bring, but for the first time in a long time, he didn't dread it. He welcomed it. Because sometimes the bravest thing you can do isn't walk away. It's choosing to stay and help someone else find the strength to stay too. By early June, the south side of the city looked different. Steel beams had turned into support walls. The hollow warehouse that once echoed with silence now thrummed with the energy of progress. There were sounds of drills' boots on gravel and voices shouting measurements over the roar of power tools. But more than anything, there was hope, the kind that settled into the space like sunlight through scaffolding. Jack stood near the entrance, hands on his hips, eyes squinting in the morning glare. He wasn't checking the load-bearing trusses this time. He was watching people. Young apprentices, some barely out of high school. Older men retraining after layoffs. Single mothers hired through a new community employment program. They all moved with purpose, like the building was somehow theirs too. "You see that," Linda said, stepping up beside him. "What?" She gestured toward a small team hoisting drywall onto the third floor. 2 months ago, half of them didn't know which end of a hammer to hold. Now look at 'em. Jack grinned. "What changed? You did." He turned to her, surprised. Linda shrugged. "You walked into a broken blueprint and started fixing it before anyone asked. That kind of thing spreads." Jack looked back at the site. She was right, but he wasn't sure it was just him. It was Elena, too. It was everyone who had decided not to wait for permission to do the right thing. People didn't talk much about what had happened behind the scenes at Warden Corp, but the ripple effects were showing. The company's name, once known for luxury developments, was now being whispered in the same breath as community outreach and transparent reform. It wasn't perfect, but it was changing. And change, Jack had learned, never started with policies. It started with people who didn't walk away. Later that afternoon, he found Elena in the main hallway, crouched down beside a young volunteer who was holding blueprints upside down and looking thoroughly defeated. "Let me guess," Jack said, approaching. "You told him architecture was just like Legos." Elena glanced up and smiled. "He's 12. I had to meet him halfway." The boy grinned sheepishly and scurried off a little more confident now. Jack handed Elena a bottle of water. "You've got a way with people. I'm just trying not to mess it up." Jack tilted his head. "You know, that's what makes it work, right? You're not pretending to have it all figured out." She stood slowly. "I used to think leadership was about being the smartest voice in the room. And now I think it's about listening when someone else finally has the courage to speak." Jack nodded, silent. Elena looked around the half-finished atrium. "You know, when this place is done, I want to name it something meaningful, something that reflects what we built here. What do you have in mind?" She turned to him, eyes soft. "Second ground." Jack raised an eyebrow. "Second ground." She smiled. "It's what you said. Remember, that you're not starting over, you're finally starting right." It stuck with me. He looked down at the concrete beneath his boots. The floor wasn't finished yet, but it already felt like a foundation. Solid. Earned. "Second ground," he said. "Yeah, that feels right." That evening, Elena hosted a small gathering on site. No donors, no reporters. Just the workers, volunteers, and a handful of community members who'd supported the project from day one. There were string lights hung from makeshift poles, folding tables with trays of food donated by local restaurants. A small speaker played soft blues as people laughed, shared stories, and, most importantly, stayed. Jack stood near the edge of it all, a cup of lemonade in hand, watching Elena move through the crowd. She wasn't performing. She was present. When she finally reached him, she looked tired but deeply content. "I talked to my sister." She said so softly, he almost didn't hear. Jack's eyes widened. Claire Elena nodded. She called. "We didn't talk about the past. Not really. Just, about how the garden she planted in Vermont is finally growing again. It was awkward, but it was real. He put a hand on her shoulder. That's a start. Elena smiled. She said something that stuck with me. She said, "Roots don't care about pride. They grow anyway." Jack chuckled. "Smart woman." "She is," Elena said. Then she added, "like someone else I know." Their eyes held for a moment, and the sounds of the party faded just enough to make room for something else, quiet understanding. Then Lily barreled over her cheeks, flushed with excitement. "Daddy, look what I made." She held up a paper sign drawn in thick crayon strokes. "Welcome to Second Ground, where good people start again." Jack knelt beside her. "Did you make that yourself?" Miss Elena helped, Lily said proudly. "But I picked the words." He looked at Elena. She looked back, and neither of them had anything clever to say, because some moments didn't need words. Some moments just needed to be felt. After the party ended, Jack and Elena stood side by side beneath the last string of lights watching the crew clean up. "You think this place will really help people?" she asked. Jack thought of Lily, of Linda, of the kid with the upside-down blueprint, of himself. "I think," he said slowly, "this place will remind people that broken doesn't mean finished, that a scar doesn't mean the story's over." Elena turned to him. "And us." He met her gaze. "We're not broken, just unfinished." She smiled. Not a business smile, not a brave one, a real one. "I can live with that," she whispered. Jack took her hand right there under the lights and held it, not like a promise, not like a conclusion, but like the beginning of something that didn't need to rush to be real, something that had been tested and chosen and earned. The official ribbon cutting was still a week away, but the building already breathed with life. Jack could feel it in the walls, in the echoes of laughter in the open atrium, the scent of fresh paint, the way footsteps fell just a little lighter now. Second Ground was no longer a construction site. It was becoming a promise. That morning, Jack walked the halls alone before the crews arrived. He passed the community kitchen where volunteers would soon prep meals for families in transition. The job training center, where rows of refurbished computers hummed quietly. The playroom, where Lily's drawings already lined the wall, a kaleidoscope of hope sketched in crayon. He paused at the roof access stairwell. Sunlight filtered down through the windows. The rooftop garden. Elena's idea. His hands ran along the steel railing as he climbed. When he stepped onto the roof, the city opened up in every direction. Morning haze drifting over brick and glass, the hum of traffic just distant enough to feel like background music. Raised garden beds were already in place, filled with soil and seedlings, basil, lettuce, lavender. A row of sunflowers leaned into the light, still small, still waiting. Jack knelt, running a hand through the earth. "Thought I might find you here." He turned. Elena stood in the doorway, coffee in one hand, a folder tucked under her arm. Her hair was wind-blown, her heels replaced by boots. She looked less like a CEO and more like someone who belonged exactly here. "I needed a moment," he said. She crossed to him and handed him the coffee. "Couldn't sleep?" she asked. He shook his head. "I was thinking about what comes next." Elena raised an eyebrow. "You're not done building." Jack smiled faintly. Not even close. They stood in silence for a while, watching the morning take shape. Then she said, "The city council approved our grant extension." Jack looked at her surprised. "We're expanding," she added. 3 more community centers across the state modeled after this one." He exhaled slowly. "You're serious?" "As a second chance," she said. He let out a low whistle. "That's a lot of work." She nodded. "That's why I came to ask you something." Jack glanced sideways. "You offering me a raise?" Elena laughed. "More like a mission." She opened the folder and pulled out a proposal. His name was on the top. "Director of Community Infrastructure," she said. "Leading the design, training the next generation, building something that lasts. Something that matters." Jack stared at the paper. "I don't need an answer today. she said gently, "but I know you. You'll think about this on the walk home on the way to the grocery store in the shower while folding laundry." "You spying on me?" "No," she said, smiling. "I just know what it looks like when a man's heart starts catching up to his purpose." Jack set the folder down carefully on a planter ledge. "I never thought I'd get back here," he admitted. "Backward to a place where the world wants what I have to offer." Elena's voice softened. "Jack, the world always wanted it. You just needed someone to say yes out loud." That evening, Jack picked Lily up from her after-school art club. Her sneakers were splattered with paint, her hands sticky with glue, and her smile wider than the whole street. "Guess what?" she said, climbing into the truck. "I got picked to help with the grand opening tour." Jack blinked. "You Miss Runaway from the mic, I'm brave now," she said proudly. "Ms. Elena said I could be the voice for all the kids who'll use the building." He smiled. "She's not wrong." Then Lily looked at him serious. "Daddy, are we staying here? Like for good?" Jack's grip on the steering wheel loosened slightly. He looked over at her, this child who had been his anchor in storms he never asked for. "I think we are," he said. She nodded, satisfied. "Good. 'Cause I already told my class you built the building and saved the CEO and fixed her heart." He choked on a laugh. "That's one way to put it." When they got home, Jack pulled out the folder from his jacket pocket. He laid it on the kitchen table and stared at it. It didn't feel like a contract. It felt like a doorway. He thought of all the places his name had disappeared from in the past, letterheads, building permits, even mailboxes. Now, here it was again. Not by accident, by choice. The next morning, Jack arrived at the site earlier than usual. Elena was already there. He didn't say anything as he handed her a cup of coffee. She took it, watching him. Then he said, "I'm in." She blinked. "You sure? I've never been more sure of anything in my life." She nodded, eyes bright. And for the first time, Jack saw it clearly, not just the building, not just the title, not just the future. He saw a life. One not made in a boardroom or a courtroom or under flashing lights, but here under the open sky on ground they had fought for together. Second ground. It wasn't just for the community. It was for them. For anyone who ever thought they were too far gone to begin again. And this time Jack wasn't just a builder. He was a believer. In himself. In her. In what could rise from the rubble if you had the courage to stay, the humility to change, and someone who believed you were worth the effort. The day of the grand opening arrived with a kind of stillness Jack hadn't felt in years. It wasn't quiet. There were trucks unloading chairs, children running through the halls, volunteers adjusting banners, but beneath the motion there was something steady. Something settled. The building was ready. Second ground stood tall, sun-washed, and graceful against the concrete skyline. Every beam and tile and brushed metal railing had a story. A hand, a heart. Jack adjusted his collar and glanced at the courtyard where guests were beginning to gather. Neighborhood families in Sunday best, city officials, volunteers, construction workers in clean shirts, some with paint still under their nails. No red carpets, no gala. Just real people, the ones who'd helped build it. And at the center of it all, Lily. She wore a pale yellow dress with mismatched barrettes in her hair and held a microphone that looked comically oversized in her small hands. Elena stood beside her, crouched low, offering encouragement that only Lily could hear. Jack stood off to the side, but Elena's eyes found him through the crowd. She smiled warm and quiet, and he nodded back. A silent pact. "We did this." The mayor took the mic first, saying all the right things about economic impact and revitalization, but the crowd only politely clapped. It wasn't until Lily stepped up that everything stilled. She cleared her throat, glanced down at her note cards, colorful hand-drawn ones, and then out at the audience. "Hi, I'm Lily Nolan. I'm 7 3/4, she began, her voice wavering. "And this place is called Second Ground. But to me, it's also something else." She paused. Jack held his breath. It's a place where people get to start new stories, like my dad, like Ms. Elena, like lots of people here. Sometimes stories don't go the way you planned. Sometimes they get crumpled. But this place, it's where you can smooth them out again. There was a long, hushed silence. Then a wave of soft applause broke through, followed by more until the courtyard filled with it. Jack wiped at his eyes unapologetically. Inside, the doors opened and the first tour began. Elena led the group with Lily proudly pointing out all her favorite places, the reading corner with beanbags, the mural she helped paint the rooftop garden. When they reached the atrium, Jack stood waiting. He motioned the group toward the plaque mounted near the entrance. Handcrafted bronze mounted in reclaimed wood, second ground where new stories begin. Dedicated to those who never walked away. Underneath were two names: Jack Nolan lead designer, Elena Ward, project visionary. Someone read it aloud. Then someone else clapped. And suddenly the atrium echoed again, not with tools or construction, but with joy. Jack turned to find Elena already watching him. He walked over. "You did it." She shook her head. "We did." He glanced around. "Still can't believe it." She smiled softly. "That's the best part of doing something real. It always feels impossible until you see it finished." Later that evening, the building emptied out. The food tables were picked clean. The banners rolled up. The crowd had gone home, but the light lingered soft and golden, spilling through the tall windows. Jack stood alone on the rooftop, leaning against the garden railing. The sunflowers had grown. Not fully bloomed yet, but taller. Reaching. Footsteps approached behind him. He didn't turn. "You always this reflective after ribbon-cutting?" Elena asked, her voice like music against the hush. He chuckled. "Only the ones that feel like home." She stepped beside him. "It really does feel like that, doesn't it?" Jack nodded. They stood quietly for a while, the city laid out in shadowed blue below them, the sky brushing pink and silver overhead. Then Elena said, "I've been thinking." "Dangerous," he teased. She elbowed him lightly. "I've been thinking. This doesn't have to be the end of anything." Jack turned to her, really looking. "You're not talking about the building." "No," she said barely above a whisper. "I'm talking about us." A long pause. She stepped closer, close enough for the space between them to feel like something sacred. "I don't know what it's supposed to look like, and I'm still figuring out how to be the kind of woman who doesn't run when things get hard." Jack's voice was steady. "Then we learn it together." Her eyes shimmered. "You sure I'm sure?" He reached out, took her hand gently in his. And for the first time, it didn't feel like two broken people trying to fill silence. It felt like two whole people building something with intention, something earned, something resilient. As they walked back down the stairwell, lights flickering on as the evening deepened, Jack thought of the life he'd left behind, the one that had collapsed in silence, grief and shame. And he thought of this one. New, imperfect, radiantly real. He glanced sideways at Elena. She looked ahead, eyes bright, like she saw something more than blueprints and headlines in their future. He smiled. Second ground. He finally understood. It wasn't just a place. It was a choice. To stay, to grow, to believe. And this time he wasn't walking away. The first autumn breeze swept through the city like a quiet benediction, rustling golden leaves across the front steps of second ground. The building stood warm against the soft chill glowing from within. Children's voices echoed in the atrium, the scent of baking bread drifted from the communal kitchen, and somewhere on the third floor a group of veterans gathered for their weekly carpentry class, fixing old chairs and, in a way, fixing themselves too. It had been 4 months since the grand opening. 4 months since the city witnessed what a second chance could look like when it was built with purpose, with care, with love. Jack stood by the rooftop garden, hands in his jacket pockets, watching the sunflowers sway in the wind. They'd bloomed late this year, tall and stubborn and brilliant, just like this place, just like the people who built it. He heard soft footsteps behind him and didn't need to turn. Elena stepped beside him, scarf tucked beneath her coat cheeks pink from the cold. They survived the frost, she said, nodding toward the flowers. So did we, Jack said, smiling. She chuckled softly, slipping her gloved hand into his. No fanfare, no declarations. Just the gentle, quiet merging of two people who had already chosen each other through the mess, through the unknown, again and again. Downstairs, Lily was leading a group of kids through her own version of a tour. That's where my dad fixed the first leak, she said, pointing toward a water pipe. But he didn't know I saw it. He looked really proud even though no one clapped. The kids giggled. And that's Ms. Elena's office, she added, standing tall. She's a boss, but she still came to my spelling bee. One of the younger boys raised a hand. Are you famous? Lily paused, thoughtfully. Not really, but I live in a place where famous things happen. Jack and Elena watched from the upper level, leaning on the railing. She's got your timing, Elena said. She's got your honesty, Jack replied. That afternoon, the center hosted its first official alumni lunch. Dozens of community members who had used Second Ground's services, job seekers, single parents, small business hopefuls returned to share their stories. A former mechanic now ran a mobile repair service from a van he bought with a grant. A woman, once homeless, now taught literacy classes in the building's evening program. A teenager who once helped hang drywall now trained as an apprentice electrician. Each one stood in front of the crowd, nervous at first, but then transformed, proud, steady, visible. Elena stood at the back with Jack, her hand on his back. I used to think legacy was about having a building with your name on it, she whispered. Jack glanced sideways. And now she looked ahead. Now I think it's about creating space for others to become who they're meant to be. Quietly, without needing to be remembered for it. Jack nodded, letting her words settle. Then, from the podium, the moderator called her name. Elena Ward, our founder and heart behind this vision. We're honored to have you speak. Elena stepped forward slowly. Jack gave her hand a light squeeze as she passed. She took the mic with a smile, but this time it wasn't the kind that softened headlines or charmed boardrooms. It was the kind she gave Lily. And Jack. The kind she hadn't known how to offer when all this began. Hi, she said. I don't want to talk long. I just want to say this. She glanced around at the faces in the room, many of whom she now knew by name. When this building was just an idea, we thought we were building it for the community. And we were. But somewhere along the way, I realized something else. I was building it for me, too. For the version of myself I thought I'd lost. For the version of others who were waiting to be seen. Her voice caught slightly. She paused. This place exists because people didn't walk away, because they stayed through discomfort, through brokenness, through history. They stayed, and they built. She smiled through the tears in her voice. And now, we get to be the kind of place that stays for someone else. After the applause faded, Jack found her outside on the front steps. The light was golden again, just like the first day he'd brought Lily home from the hospital. Everything about this moment felt earned. You always know how to say exactly the thing no one wants to admit they needed to hear, he said. She looked up at him. That's because I've been listening to you. They stood in silence, the breeze sweeping around them gently. Then Elena took something from her coat pocket and handed it to him. It was a small brass key. He raised an eyebrow. It's for the new location, she said. Upstate, Community Center number 2. Construction begins in spring. Jack turned the key over in his hand. You sure you want me to take the lead on that? She grinned. I wouldn't trust it to anyone else. Then softer. Besides, I already bought you a coffee mug that says Director of Groundbreaking Miracles. Jack laughed full and free before leaning down and kissing her forehead. And for a moment nothing else mattered, not the past, not the risks, not the long road still ahead. Just this. 2 people who stayed. That night, when Jack tucked Lily into bed, she looked up and said, "Daddy? Are we really going to help build another place?" "We are," he said, "if you're up for another adventure." She yawned and smiled. "I think Miss Elena should come with us." Jack kissed her on the forehead. I think she already said yes. Outside, the city quieted. The lights of Second Ground glowed into the night, steady and warm like a lighthouse in the middle of a stormy world. And inside those walls, in the cracks where most people feared the light would disappear, something stronger took root. Not just second chances, not just new beginnings, but belonging. Because sometimes the most extraordinary thing you can build is the life you never thought you'd get to live again, and the people who choose to stay in it with you. She was shivering in the rain, too proud to beg, too tired to hide. He had just enough food for himself and his little girl. But when she whispered, "May I take these leftovers, sir?" he nodded. He didn't know her name. He didn't know what she was running from. And he definitely didn't know what that moment would change. If stories of quiet kindness, second chances, and unexpected connections speak to your heart, we invite you to stay till the end. And if you enjoy stories like this, don't forget to subscribe for more heartfelt tales that just might stay with you long after the screen fades to black. May I take these leftovers? Sir, the single dad, nodded. He had no idea she owned the building. The string quartet played its final note, a triumphant swell echoing across the marble atrium of the Lexington Grand Hotel. Crystal chandeliers glimmered like suspended stars above an audience dressed in tuxedos and designer gowns. Murmurs of anticipation ran through the crowd like static. The groom, Everett Langston III, heir to a billion-dollar political dynasty, shifted from one foot to the other beneath the rose-covered arch. The press cameras clicked in short bursts, trained on the aisle where the bride was to appear. She didn't. Madeline Walsh stood barefoot in the back hallway, silk heels dangling from her fingers, veil tossed across a velvet bench. Her reflection in the ornate mirror looked like someone else's fantasy lace bodice, diamond necklace, perfectly sculpted makeup. A woman built from expectation. "I can't do this," she whispered to no one. Outside the heavy doors, her father's voice barked into his phone. "Where is she? We don't have time for this. Get her in line." She heard his assistant mumbling a rushed apology. Her chest tightened. Madeline turned from the mirror and pulled the zipper at her back. The dress slid off her shoulders like dead weight. She caught it before it hit the floor and folded it meticulously, habitually placing it over the bench like an old habit she was finally ready to bury. For once, she wasn't going to do what was expected. 25 minutes later, the headlines read, "Walsh Heiress Vanishes. Wedding halted at the altar, CEO gone rogue, Madeline Walsh missing on wedding day." But Madeline didn't read them. She was already blocks away, coat wrapped tightly around her, walking down West 73rd with wind-whipped hair and a carry-on suitcase. No entourage, no limo, no press handler. She ducked into a side street, heart-pounding like she was being chased. In a way, she was chased by a life pre-written for her. Daughter of a ruthless real estate mogul. Wharton educated. Appointed CEO of Walsh Holdings at 32. Engaged to a man who smiled for cameras but looked through her like she was an acquisition. She used the last working credit card in her name to book a 1-month rental in Brooklyn. Small, anonymous, just outside a neighborhood she remembered approving redevelopment permits for, but had never stepped foot in. She would stay quiet. She would disappear. Not forever. Just long enough to remember who she was underneath the wealth. 4 days later, it was raining in soft, persistent sheets. The kind of New York rain that soaked your bones no matter how short the walk. Madeline hadn't eaten since the night before. The $40 she had left was dwindling fast. She'd spent most of it on groceries for an elderly neighbor who had offered her a spare blanket. She wandered near a corner deli and paused beneath the awning of a narrow cafe, trying to will away the hunger cramping her stomach. That's when she saw them. A man in his early 30s, tired eyes, 5 o'clock shadow calloused hands sitting cross-legged on a bench under the same overhang. A small girl, maybe 5, with tangled curls and a faded unicorn raincoat sat beside him, swinging her feet. They shared a wrapped sandwich between them, careful measured bites like they'd learned to ration joy. Madeline tried to move away, but her legs wouldn't cooperate. The child noticed her first. The man followed her gaze and turned toward Madeline. His eyes weren't suspicious or guarded. They were steady. Madeline's throat burned. "I'm sorry," she said, voice barely audible over the patter of rain. "May I take those leftovers, sir?" He blinked, looked down at the half sandwich left on the wax paper. "Sure," he said, after a pause, holding it out to her like it wasn't strange at all. "They're yours." The girl tugged at a plastic baggie from her coat pocket and shyly offered a crumbled cookie. "You can have mine, too. It's still good." Madeline's composure cracked. She took the food with both hands, barely whispering, "Thank you." "No problem," the man said, nodding. "I'm Jack. This is Ellie." Madeline opened her mouth, but no name came out. Finally, she said, "Mara." It was the name of a character from a novel she'd loved as a teenager, a girl who ran away from a palace to live among the people. It felt appropriate. "Well, Mara," Jack said, his voice kind. "Hope things get better." He didn't ask questions. He didn't judge her for the soaked clothes, the worn-out shoes, or the way her hands trembled when she unwrapped the sandwich like it was sacred. He just nodded and kept his arm around Ellie, whispering something that made the little girl giggle. Madeline stepped backward into the rain again, holding the sandwich and cookie like they were a lifeline. As she turned the corner, tears mixed with the rain on her face. She didn't know what had just happened, but she felt it that one moment had shifted something inside her. She wasn't used to kindness without condition, without agenda, especially not from strangers, especially not from someone with so little to give. That night, she lay curled on a worn mattress in her rented room, staring at the ceiling and thinking about Jack and Ellie. She imagined the girls' laughter filling the tiny apartment, the man's calm steadiness as he shared what little they had. She could still feel the warmth of that cookie in her hand. Outside, rain tapped gently on the window pane like it wanted to be let in. And somewhere deep inside, Madeline Walsh, the missing bride, the runaway CEO, something began to melt. The next morning, sunlight filtered through the warped window blinds of Madeline's small apartment, casting broken lines across the scratched hardwood floor. She lay on the worn mattress without moving, fully clothed blanket kicked off in the night. Her stomach no longer ached from hunger, but something deeper lingered, a gnawing sense of dislocation. In the silence, she thought about the way the little girl had smiled at her the day before. The way Jack had handed her the sandwich without hesitation, as if it was the most natural thing in the world. No one had treated her like that in years, without calculation, without expectation. At the office, every smile hid a contract. At home, even love had started to feel conditional. But that moment in the rain, that had been different. Pure. She hadn't told them who she was, didn't even use her real name, and still they had looked at her like she mattered. Madeline sat up slowly and rubbed her temples. On the cracked nightstand beside her lay the uneaten half of the cookie Ellie had given her. She'd wrapped it carefully in a paper towel, unsure why. But now she stared at it like it was more valuable than the emeralds locked away in her family's penthouse vault. She tucked it into her coat pocket and stood. Outside, the city was transitioning from rain to cold sun, the kind of crisp winter day that made breath fog up in clouds. Madeline wrapped her coat tighter and started walking, unsure of her direction, until her feet found their way back to the same cafe corner. It wasn't a conscious choice, it was gravitational. Jack and Ellie were there again, sitting on the same bench. He was repairing what looked like a broken toy truck with duct tape and quiet focus. Ellie leaned against his arm, chewing on an apple slice. Madeline paused across the street, heart hammering. She didn't know why she was nervous. She was just another face on the sidewalk. But something about that man and his daughter made her feel exposed, like they could see right through her despite knowing nothing at all. She almost turned back, but Ellie looked up and grinned. Hey, Cookie Lady Madeline blinked, then laughed despite herself. Jack glanced over his expression, warming with recognition. "Well, look who's survived the storm," he said, gently twisting the toy's wheel back into place. "Mara, right," she nodded. "I wasn't sure if you'd be here. We usually are after school drop-off." "It's part of our routine," Jack said. "Ellie gets her apple, I get 10 minutes of quiet, and this old truck gets one more chance at life. Dad says if you fix something instead of throwing it out, you learn what matters," Ellie chimed in proudly. Madeline's throat tightened. "That's a good philosophy." Jack shrugged with a quiet smile. "We don't have a lot, so we take care of what we've got." Madeline sat down at the far end of the bench, careful not to get too close. She didn't want to disturb them. She just wanted to be near it again. That warmth, that calm. "You two always this generous with strangers?" she asked gently. Jack chuckled. "You weren't a stranger. You were someone who looked like she needed something." "That's enough for me." A pause stretched between them, filled only by the hum of traffic and a distant saxophone from a subway performer. Madeline looked at him sideways. "You ever wonder who people used to be?" Jack nodded slowly. "Sure, but I care more about who they're trying to become." She swallowed hard. Over the next few days their paths kept crossing, sometimes by coincidence, sometimes not. Madeline found herself circling the neighborhood after errands she invented just to pass by that bench. Jack never pried, never questioned, but he began bringing an extra coffee. Ellie always had a drawing to show her a flower with too many petals, a crooked rainbow, a stick figure with 3 arms because she's special. Madeline kept the drawings. She folded them neatly and tucked them into her empty wallet. One morning she brought a bag of groceries to the older woman in the next apartment, Mrs. Delgado, a retired music teacher who lived alone and walked with a cane. The woman eyed her skeptically at first, but softened when Madeline offered to sweep the hall for her. "You've got hands too soft to clean," Mrs. Delgado muttered. "You one of those women running from a husband." Madeline hesitated, then said, "I'm just running from a life that didn't fit." Mrs. Delgado nodded slowly. "Takes guts to step out of a frame someone else painted for you." That night, Madeline wrote in her notebook for the first time in months. Just one line. "Maybe I'm not lost. Maybe I'm just under construction." The following weekend, Jack offered Madeline the other side of the bench like it was a regular thing now. Ellie jumped up and down, asking if she wanted to visit the community center where they were painting a mural. "I can't draw," Madeline admitted. "That's okay," Ellie said. "You can hold the paint cup. Or smile. Smiling helps." Madeline followed them without thinking. The mural was halfway done, an explosion of colors and hopeful messages. Children, parents, grandparents all adding their strokes. A man in a wheelchair painted the word home in bright green. A teenager spray-painted second chances in careful cursive under a bird in flight. Jack handed her a brush without looking. "Add something. I don't know what. Then just start." She dipped the brush into yellow and made a sun in the top corner. Crooked, too bright. But it made Ellie clap. In that moment, surrounded by strangers who smiled without knowing her name, Madeline felt something crack open. Belonging. Not because of her last name, not because of her wealth, but because of kindness, of shared space, of the simple dignity of being human together. And for the first time in a long time, she didn't feel like a woman who had run away. She felt like a woman who had finally arrived. The cold had sharpened in the last few days, slicing through the city like a quiet warning that winter wasn't done yet. But in the narrow hallways of the aging brick apartment complex on Lincoln Avenue, warmth took the shape of gestures too small for headlines. Shared, coffee-held doors, nods between neighbors who had nothing to spare but still gave something. Madeline stood at the window of her apartment, watching condensation bead along the edges. Her breath clouded the glass as she stared down into the courtyard below. A boy in a navy sweatshirt chased a basketball between puddles. A couple in their 60s swept the walk together without saying a word. This wasn't the world she had been raised in, but it was the world that was slowly beginning to feel real. She glanced toward her nightstand where a folded piece of paper rested between the worn pages of a novel she hadn't managed to finish. Ellie's drawing of the three-armed woman, because she's special. It had made her laugh at first, but now she couldn't look at it without tearing up. There was something about how earnestly that little girl saw people. Saw her. Later that afternoon, Madeline stepped into the hallway with a box of canned goods she'd picked up at a local pantry for Mrs. Delgado. The older woman had taken a fall 2 nights ago while reaching for a bottle of Tylenol. Madeline had heard the thud through the wall and rushed over to find her sitting on the floor, dignity dented, but not broken. "You're back again," Mrs. Delgado said as Madeline knocked and let herself in. "What now? Another soup that tastes like the inside of a boot?" Madeline smiled. "This one has actual seasoning. I made sure. I'll believe it when my tongue does." Despite the sarcasm, the old woman's eyes softened. She took the bag and hobbled back to her chair near the window, motioning for Madeline to sit. "You keep coming back like a dog with a bone." "What are you looking for, girl?" "I don't know," Madeline admitted, settling onto the couch. "Maybe I just needed to be somewhere people see you. Not just your name. Not your money. Just you, Mrs." Delgado made a sound in her throat somewhere between a scoff and a hum of agreement. "It's easy to forget who you are when everyone else is busy telling you." Madeline looked at her. "Did you ever forget?" "Oh, plenty of times. I was a teacher, then I wasn't. A wife, then I wasn't. You lose pieces of yourself over time, but sometimes you find new ones. Unexpected ones." She pointed a gnarled finger at Madeline. "That's what you're doing, aren't you? Finding the pieces that make sense again." Madeline nodded slowly. Something like that. The next day, Jack invited her to help fix a broken pipe in the basement of the building. "It's not glamorous," he said, handing her a flashlight. "But if you're looking to earn your keep, here's your chance." They climbed down the narrow steps into the cold, echoing dark. Water pooled along the cement floor where a pipe had cracked beneath the utility sink. Jack crouched beside it with a wrench and a patience that came from years of practice. "My landlord won't call a plumber unless something's on fire." "So I learned." Madeline knelt beside him, holding the flashlight steady. "You could have called your city council representative. Tenants' rights are pretty clear about these things." Jack shot her a sideways look, amused. "You sure know a lot about property law for someone couch surfing." She bit back a smile. "Let's say I read a lot." Jack didn't push. He just adjusted the wrench and said, "You know, most people pass this place without a glance. But you've been paying attention." Madeline blinked. "What do you mean?" "You talked to Mrs. Delgado. You helped that teenage kid when he locked himself out. You show up." "No one else ever expected me to," she said quietly. "They just expected results." Jack nodded slowly, tightening the pipe. "Well, we don't care about resumes around here. We just care who shows up when it counts." That night, as they walked back upstairs, Madeline asked, "Do you always fix things for everyone?" "I try," Jack said. "There's enough broken stuff in the world. If I can keep this little corner together, maybe that's enough." By the end of the week, Madeline's world had shrunk to this neighborhood, and strangely, it didn't feel like a loss. She walked with Ellie to the school bus. She swept the hallway when the super didn't. She carried groceries for a mother with 2 kids and no stroller. Each act was tiny. None of them solved her greater life problem, what came next when her time undercover ran out, but they filled her with a feeling she hadn't known she'd been missing relevance. And then came the letter, taped to every door in the building, stark white, cold as the wind outside. Notice of termination of tenancy. This building has been scheduled for redevelopment. All current tenants must vacate the premises within 14 calendar days. The room tilted. Madeline read the letter again and again, fingers trembling. It was official. Walsh Holdings, her company. Her name at the top, even though she hadn't seen the document until now. The signature, some junior executive she remembered hiring in a moment of arrogance. Jack stepped into the hallway as she tore it down. His jaw was set. "So this is how it works," he muttered. "We give, we build, and then they erase us." Madeline couldn't speak. Couldn't tell him the truth, not here, not now. Her chest burned with guilt. "Looks like we've got 2 weeks," Jack said quietly, looking down the hallway like it was already fading. "Time to figure out where to go next." Then he glanced back at her eyes, softer than she deserved. "You okay?" Madeline nodded numbly, swallowing hard. But deep down, something fractured. She wasn't just part of the system that had failed these people. She was the face on the letter. And now she had to decide what kind of name she wanted to live with. The eviction notice was still clenched in Madeline's hand as she descended the creaking stairs of the apartment building. Her breath hitched chest hollow. On paper, it was just another redevelopment project streamlining low-value assets to maximize ROI. On the ground, it meant families' uprooted dreams dismantled and Jack and Ellie out on the street. All because of a decision she had once signed off on without looking past the bottom line. Now, those numbers had faces and names, and a little girl who gave away her last cookie. Outside, the air was sharp and dry. A few tenants stood huddled near the mailboxes, eyes scanning the notices posted on every surface like funeral announcements. Whispers carried, "Where will we go?" "My sister's couch." The shelters are full again. And then Mrs. Delgado's voice cut through it all like a tired bell. "They don't care about people like us. Never have." Madeline turned toward her. The old woman leaned on her cane, a folded notice in one hand and a dignity too weathered to crumble in the other. "I'm sorry," Madeline murmured. The words felt brittle, too small. "Mrs." Delgado looked at her with eyes that had seen more winters than anyone should face alone. "Don't be sorry. Be useful." That night, Madeline sat in the dark, her phone screen glowing faintly. Her hand hovered over the call button for Olivia, her former executive assistant. Olivia would still take her call. She'd kept Madeline's disappearance a secret when reporters came knocking because Olivia, unlike most people in that office, remembered Madeline before the power, before the suits. She stared at the number for a long time, then put the phone down. She wasn't ready to return yet. Not in a car with tinted windows, not with a press release and a strategic reversal. She needed to go deeper, to listen first. The next day she walked the neighborhood, not as a CEO in disguise, but as a resident, as someone desperate to understand. She visited the corner bodega where Mr. Thomas the veteran in a worn army jacket ran tabs for single mothers who couldn't pay. She stopped by the community center where Mrs. Park taught English to immigrants in the evenings using paper she bought with her own pension. She sat beside a boy on the playground whose mother worked night shifts at the laundromat 2 blocks over. "We'll move again," he said. "We always move," Madeline asked softly. "Do you want to?" He shrugged. "Sometimes, but not this time. I have a friend here. We both like the same swings." That sentence alone lodged in her chest like a splinter. She filled her notebook with names and stories. Some offered easily. Some came only in passing in body language and quiet looks. But the pain was universal. This place, this rundown building on Lincoln Avenue, was a fragile web of connection built not with money but with moments. And now it was scheduled to be erased. That evening, Jack found her sitting alone on the stoop, shoulders hunched against the wind. Ellie had fallen asleep upstairs after a long day, too tired to notice the growing tension thickening in the air. He handed her a cup of lukewarm coffee from the corner store. "It's terrible," he said, "but it's warm." She took it with a grateful nod. For a long time, neither of them spoke. Then Jack asked quietly, "You ever been kicked out of your home?" Madeline didn't answer right away. "I've walked away from homes," she said finally, "but never had one taken from me." He nodded slowly, his gaze fixed somewhere far beyond the broken steps. "I was evicted once, back in Kansas, before Ellie was born. Lost everything in the flood. Thought I'd bounce back. I didn't." She looked at him. "What happened?" Ended up in a shelter. Slept in a car for a while after that. There were nights I had to choose between eating and buying diapers. Nights I wanted to disappear. He glanced sideways at her. You know what saved me? What someone gave me a toolbox. Madeline blinked. A toolbox. Yeah, said, you're good with your hands. Maybe this'll help you fix things again. He smiled faintly. Didn't fix everything, but it gave me a reason to believe I could start over. She looked down at her hands, soft and uncalloused. I've never fixed anything with mine. Jack's voice softened. You could start now. Later, as she walked back upstairs, Madeline paused by the community bulletin board in the lobby. Taped among yoga class flyers and missing pet signs was a printout someone had typed up in bold black letters. When they silence your voice, write it on the walls. Beneath it, someone had scribbled in red marker, and will read it out loud. She stared at it for a long time. That night, she finally picked up her phone and called Olivia. Holy, Olivia answered on the first ring. You're alive. Are you safe? Where the hell are you? I'm okay, Madeline said, voice steady. But I need your help. Olivia exhaled. Let me guess. This is about the Lincoln redevelopment mess. You've seen it. I signed off on the last update. Yeah, but I didn't push the timeline. That came from finance. They're on a warpath to clean up our low-efficiency holdings. They're not holdings, Madeline said quietly. They're homes. A beat of silence. Who are you, and what have you done with the Ice Queen? Madeline laughed, a brittle, startled sound. She melted. Tell me what you need, Olivia said. No hesitation. I need access to every file, every clause, every contract related to Lincoln Avenue. Quietly. No alerts. You want to reverse the eviction. I want to undo the damage I helped create. And I want to make sure this never happens again. There was another pause. Then, okay, I'll send you everything by tomorrow. And Olivia. Yeah. Thank you for still believing in me. I never stopped. I just waited for you to believe in yourself again. As Madeline hung up, the building creaked in the cold. A floorboard settled above her. Somewhere outside, wind howled through a loose gutter. And yet within her, something rooted deep and real. The woman who once signed papers in penthouses had just started listening to people who'd never had a seat at the table. And for the first time in her life, she wasn't speaking for them. She was getting ready to speak with them. It began with a power outage. The storm that rolled into the city that night wasn't dramatic. No thunder, no lightning, just a slow, relentless drizzle that seeped into bricks and bones. By 10 p.m., the hallway lights in the building flickered and died. The heater gave up half an hour later. Madeline sat on the edge of her mattress, clutching a flashlight and listening to the pipes groan above her. She'd layered every sweater she owned, but the cold was creeping in like a thief. A knock on the door startled her. She opened it to find Jack standing in the dark holding a candle in a glass jar and a blanket tucked under one arm. We're taking refuge upstairs, he said. The back unit's got a space heater, one of those old ceramic ones that still works when nothing else does. She hesitated. I'm okay. He looked her over once. You're shivering. I'm fine. He raised a brow, the candlelight flickering across his face. You've got that look like you're trying to out stubborn hypothermia. I've won worse battles. Try winning one against Ellie. She already made a spot for you on the floor. That made her smile. I don't want to impose. You helped Mrs. Delgado carry groceries up 4 flights today, Jack said. I think you've earned some floor space. The back unit was a little warmer, though the chill still pressed at the corners. Ellie had made a nest of blankets on the living room rug, a flashlight propped under a plastic bowl to cast star-shaped shadows on the ceiling. She squealed when Madeline walked in. I saved the best spot I thought that was for the cat, Jack teased. We don't have a cat, Ellie giggled. That's why it's the best? Madeline knelt onto the edge of the nest. I don't think I've had a sleepover since I was 10. Dad doesn't let me go to sleepovers, Ellie said. He says people don't always come back. Jack froze mid-step with a pillow in hand, his jaw tightening. Ellie didn't seem to notice. She lay on her back watching the shifting lights. "But you came back." Madeline's chest ached. "I did," she whispered. Later that night, with Ellie fast asleep between them, Madeline sat against the wall, arms wrapped around her knees. Jack handed her a mug of something hot he'd rigged up warm milk with cinnamon using a camp stove. "It's not espresso, but it's old-fashioned comfort." She accepted it with both hands. "This is more than comfort. This is survival." Jack leaned back, his gaze on the window. Rain tapped softly on the glass like a lullaby. "Ellie doesn't know we might not have a home soon. I haven't told her yet." Madeline nodded. "She shouldn't have to carry that." "I'm trying to fix it," Jack said quietly, "but I don't know if I can this time. Everything's more expensive. There's nowhere left to go." He looked at her. "You ever feel like no matter how much you hold things together, life still finds a way to pry them apart?" She looked down at the mug in her lap. "Yes," she said softly. "All the time." Jack watched her for a beat. "Who did you leave behind?" The question landed like a stone in her stomach. No judgment in his voice, just the open door of someone who'd been broken too and wasn't afraid of wreckage anymore. "I left myself behind," she said after a long pause. "I lived in a world where everything had a number, profit margins, square footage, stock values. I thought if I got it all right, I'd finally feel real, whole." She looked up, but I never did, so I ran. Jack's eyes didn't waver. Sometimes running is the bravest thing we can do. They sat in silence for a while, listening to the heater hum and Ellie's slow, even breathing. "She likes you," Jack said. "I like her too. She's a good judge of character. Better than I ever was." Madeline met his eyes. "You seem like a pretty good judge to me." Jack laughed under his breath. "I gave the last of our sandwich to a woman I didn't know standing in the rain. I wasn't dangerous. I didn't think so." He tilted his head. "But you were definitely lost." She didn't deny it. "You still lost?" he asked. "I'm starting to think maybe I just took the long way home." That night, Madeline didn't dream of penthouses or headlines or conference calls. She dreamt of a kitchen with a leaky faucet, a child laughing at plastic constellations, and a man with quiet hands who fixed things that didn't belong to him. When she awoke, Ellie had curled against her like they'd always known each other. Jack was already up making toast on the camp stove. Madeline sat up slowly, pulling the blanket tighter around her. Jack turned and handed her a plate. "No eviction notice in the toast today." "That's a win." She smiled. "I'll take it." But as she chewed, a plan began to form in her mind. Not a business strategy. Not a damage control memo. A real plan. To stay. To fight. To fix what she helped break. She didn't just want to say thank you anymore. She wanted to earn her place among people who never stopped offering what little they had, even to a stranger in the rain. By the end of the week, the sense of quiet dread had settled over the building like dust in a forgotten attic. It was in the way people avoided each other's eyes in the hallway and how the bulletin board remained untouched, no new flyers pinned, no scribbled notes of borrowed sugar or missing cats. The eviction notice had silenced something. Madeline could feel it pulsing in the walls. She stood by the mailboxes with Jack, both staring at the same sheet of paper taped to the wall like a death sentence. It was colder today, wind curling around the frame of the building like fingers trying to pry it loose from the ground. "I've lived here 5 years," Jack said softly. Ellie took her first steps in the kitchen. "We painted clouds on her bedroom ceiling." He smiled faintly. That was a terrible idea, looked like a smoggy sky. But she loved it. Madeline watched him, guilt chewing through her ribs like acid. She couldn't tell him yet. Not until she had something better than an apology. The signature on the notice still made her stomach twist. Jeremy Langford, Jr. Executive, freshly promoted, once eager to impress her during quarterly reviews. He had taken her silence as permission. And now the result stood before her in bruised eyes and packed boxes. "You think if we band together," Jack continued, "the city will step in." She wanted to say yes, that the mayor's office would swoop in, that local media would care, but she'd been on the other side of that table. She knew how the machine worked. Public outcry mattered only if it embarrassed someone powerful. I think, she said carefully, you need more than hope. You need a plan. Jack looked at her eyes, narrowing slightly. You always talk like someone who's read too many legal memos. I've read more than that, she said, and meant it. Later that evening, the building's lobby was unusually quiet. Families were already preparing to move cardboard boxes stacked in corners. The smells of cooking were absent, no garlic, no fried onions, no warmth. As if everyone had accepted the sentence and slipped into mourning. Madeline knocked on Mrs. Delgado's door carrying a small box of tea and a fresh loaf of rye bread she'd found at the Saturday farmer's market. The old woman opened the door slowly, her hair in a silver braid down her back, eyes wary. You here to say goodbye too? No, Madeline said, holding up the bread like an offering. I'm here to ask for advice. Mrs. Delgado stepped aside, wordlessly motioning for her to sit. The apartment was tidy, sparse, but full of memory. A piano scratched slightly out of tune sat beneath the window. Sheet music was stacked neatly on the bench. Madeline had never heard her play, but now she wondered why. I don't know what to do, she admitted, pouring the tea. They won't listen to the residents. Not the city. Not the company. Not until it's too late. Mrs. Delgado stirred her cup slowly, her eyes on the rising steam. That's the problem with people who don't come from struggle. You think logic will make the world bend. Madeline looked down. I know. I've been part of that. You still are. The question hung in the air. Madeline didn't answer right away. I'm trying not to be, she said finally. I've been learning. Mrs. Delgado leaned forward, her voice low. Then, stop waiting for permission. You know where the power is. That night, Madeline sent a second message to Olivia. She'd already received the internal redevelopment memos, blueprints, and board meeting minutes. She read every word twice. The project was fast-tracked to break ground within 45 days. Once the last tenant left, demolition would begin. Can you send me the original land agreement, she asked. Within 10 minutes, Olivia responded. Found it. You're not going to like this. The attachment came through PDF, signed and notarized nearly 20 years ago by her father. The clause, she feared, was there. The building could not be sold or repurposed without a full 6-month written notice to tenants per Community Housing Preservation Agreement. They'd broken the contract. Her father had buried the clause in small print, but it was still binding. Her fingers flew across the screen. Olivia, get me a copy of the original deed registration and anything signed by local housing officials in 2006. On it. Madeline. You planning what I think you're planning, I'm planning to stop this. The next morning, she sat with Jack on the stoop, sipping coffee as Ellie played nearby, chasing a paper airplane through the puddles. I need to talk to you, she said, watching Ellie with gentle eyes. Jack turned toward her, sensing the shift in tone. What is it? She took a breath. She could almost hear the pages turning in her head, every line of legal jargon, every headline she'd ever helped spin. I know who owns this building, she said, and I know why this is happening. Jack's brow furrowed. You've been looking into it more than that, she thought. She was the one who'd once approved the deal, the woman whose name opened doors and closed them. I know the redevelopment is illegal, she said. They violated a clause in the original agreement. I can stop this. Jack stared at her. How would you know that I... She hesitated. Let's just say I've worked in real estate law. I know this world better than I want to admit. He didn't say anything for a moment. Finally, he asked, Why are you doing this? Madeline looked at him, heart raw. Because you gave me a sandwich when you had nothing. Because Ellie shared a cookie. Because I came here to disappear, and instead, I remembered who I am. She paused, her voice softer. And because it's my fault. Jack's face didn't change, but the silence felt like gravity. Yours, he said finally. Madeline nodded. I didn't mean for this to happen. But I was part of it, and I want to make it right." Jack leaned back his eyes on the sky. Then he said almost reluctantly, "So what do we do?" She turned toward him with quiet resolve. "We fight." In that moment, something shifted between them. No longer strangers, no longer just neighbors, but allies, witnesses to each other's quiet undoing and the fragile, determined rebuild that followed. And beneath the cold December sky, a seed of hope was planted. Not in a press release, not in a courtroom, but on a stoop in a neighborhood no one powerful had ever bothered to walk through. Until now. The next morning, Madeline stood in front of her bathroom mirror staring at her reflection like she didn't quite recognize it. The woman in the glass looked older than she remembered, not in years, but in truth. Her hair was pulled back, her jaw set, her eyes unflinching. Not polished, not perfect, just real. She hadn't worn makeup in weeks. Her nails were chipped, but something about her posture whispered strength. She picked up her phone and called Olivia. "It's time," she said. On the other end, Olivia didn't ask for clarification. "You want me to schedule the board meeting?" "Not yet," Madeline said. "I want to walk through that door when I'm ready with evidence, a plan, and my name." "Then you're going to need more than a speech," Olivia warned. "I'm counting on it." The days that followed moved like the ticking of a clock winding up to something seismic. Madeline spent her mornings at the library poring through property laws, historical preservation acts, and zoning records. At night, she sat with Jack in the basement of the building mapping out a grassroots strategy. They organized the tenants. Mrs. Delgado, once skeptical, now ran point on calling local news outlets. "I've been ignored by people in suits for 50 years. Let's give them something they can't ignore," she said, dialing one-handed while stirring her soup with the other. A group of teenagers offered to design posters and spread the word online. "No one listens to old buildings," one of them said, "but they listen to stories." "Let's make this place impossible to forget." They launched a campaign like Not Just Brick and Glass. Each day, someone told their story on camera. A veteran who'd found peace after PTSD. A mother who worked 2 jobs to raise twins in a 1-bedroom. Jack, holding Ellie's tiny hand, speaking softly about raising a daughter on a janitor's salary and how a small apartment had become their entire universe. Madeline stayed behind the scenes. For now. One evening, Jack walked her home after a community meeting. "You know," he said, "kicking a pebble along the sidewalk, I used to think you were running from something." "I was," she admitted. "And now," she paused, then smiled faintly. "Now I think I'm running towards something." They stopped at her door. The air between them was warmer than the December night should allow. "You're different," he said quietly. "Not just from when I met you. From most people I've ever known." She looked down, suddenly aware of how close they were. "Most people," he continued, "don't stick around when it gets messy." "You did." "I was part of the mess," she said. "The least I can do is help clean it up." Jack leaned against the doorframe, hands in his pockets. "I don't know what you were before you came here, Mara, but I like who you are now." Her breath caught. For a moment, the rest of the world, the headlines, the lawsuits, the demolition plans fell away. But she didn't reach for him. Not yet. There was still truth left unspoken. The following morning, Madeline met Olivia at a small coffee shop on the Upper West Side. "I've booked the conference room," Olivia said, sliding a folder across the table. 10 a.m., Tuesday. "Full board will be there." "Good," Madeline said, "and the press embargoed." One of the junior editors at the Times is interested human impact piece. Wants to come down and see the building before anything runs. Madeline nodded, scanning the documents. Everything was in place, but her stomach twisted. Not with fear, with responsibility. "How are they going to react?" she asked. When I walk in again, Olivia's brow arched. "Like hyenas with brand consultants." "But it doesn't matter. You're not going there to ask permission." Madeline smiled. "I'm going to take back what matters." That night, she sat beside Jack on the rooftop, the city glowing beneath them in a million little promises. Ellie was asleep, tucked beneath the crooked stars she once painted on the ceiling. "You look like someone carrying something heavy," Jack said, handing her a mug of cocoa. She took a sip. "Tomorrow I go back." He turned to face her. "Back where to the top floor of the glass tower I helped build. To the table I abandoned. And this time, I'm not showing up in a dress someone else picked. I'm walking in with everything I've learned down here." Jack was quiet for a while. Then he said, "You scared?" "Terrified," she admitted. "But I'm more afraid of staying silent than I am of failing." He nodded slowly, watching her with a softness that made her want to cry. "Whatever happens," he said, "Ellie and we won't forget what you did here, even if no one else ever knows your name." She reached into her coat and pulled out a folded slip of paper. "Ellie's drawing. The three-armed woman. I've kept this the whole time," she said. Jack took it, smiling. "Because she's special. Because she's true," Madeline said. Then quietly she added, "And maybe that's who I want to be." Jack looked at her for a long time. Then without ceremony he took her hand. It was calloused now. A little rough from days of lifting, fixing, and standing up. But when he held it, she felt it not just the warmth, but the trust. The beginning of something not built on wealth or need or desperation. Just respect, kindness, and the quiet beginning of love. Tomorrow she would return to the boardroom. Tomorrow she would step back into the world that once molded her. But tonight, on a rooftop above a building slated for demolition beneath stars, real and painted, Madeline Walsh was exactly where she needed to be. And for the first time in her life, she wasn't afraid to be seen. The elevator doors opened with a sterile chime, and for the first time in weeks Madeline Walsh stepped into the 30th floor of Walsh Holdings. No disguise, no hooded coat, no need to hide behind another name. The lobby hadn't changed. Polished marble minimalist florals, the quiet hum of climate control. But everything inside her had. She walked past reception. The assistant, a young man in an expensive suit who clearly didn't recognize her without heels and a designer bag, began to rise. Olivia intercepted him with a small shake of her head. "She's expected." Inside the boardroom, 11 people sat around a long mahogany table flanked by floor-to-ceiling windows that made the city outside look like a model beneath glass. At the head of the table was Jeremy Langford, smug in a tailored suit, arms crossed like he owned the skyline. He rose when he saw her surprise flickering in his eyes. "Madeline," he said carefully, "we didn't expect you back." Clearly, she replied, her voice cool but calm. "Let's begin." Olivia closed the door behind her, sat beside her, and laid out a thick folder marked "Confidential" in bold letters. "Item 1, Madeline said, sliding the document forward. "The Lincoln Avenue Redevelopment Project. Effective immediately it's suspended." Jeremy blinked. "You don't have the authority." "Yes, I do." Her tone didn't rise, but it didn't need to. She turned to the board, scanning familiar faces. "In 2006, my father signed a preservation covenant with the city protecting the Lincoln Building for a minimum of 30 years from repurposing without due process. That covenant was buried in the acquisition file. It was violated. Illegally." Murmurs erupted. One of the legal counsel shifted uncomfortably in his seat. "I have documentation filed and notarized backed by city record," she continued, sliding copies across the table. "Your demolition order." Jeremy was not only unethical, it was in breach of contract. Which means if anyone from the press finds out, or worse, the city council, it won't just be a PR nightmare. It will be a legal liability. Jeremy's jaw clenched. "You've been gone for a month, Madeline. You disappeared. You abandoned your role. You don't get to walk back in, and I didn't abandon anything," she said, voice low but laced with steel. "I stepped away to remember why this company exists." She stood. "We used to build communities, not just property portfolios. We were about long-term value, stability, people." She let the silence stretch. "I spent the last month living in that building. I met the people you tried to erase with a backdoor vote and a glossy press packet. She pulled out her final piece. And here's the kicker. You broke the clause and you did it without full board consent. That violates internal policy. Another round of murmurs. Jeremy stiffened. You're grandstanding. No, she said. I'm correcting. She turned toward the board. I'm not here to burn everything down. I'm here to rebuild it from the inside out. If you vote to suspend the redevelopment, we can avoid litigation, reinvest in restoration, and use the community engagement data we've gathered to pilot a new model, one that blends profit with purpose. Olivia added, the campaign's already gone viral. Not just brick and glass is trending. A Times piece drops tomorrow. A board member raised his hand. You've done all this in 30 days, Madeline met his gaze. No, they did it. I just finally listened. The vote wasn't unanimous, but it was decisive. The Lincoln Avenue project was frozen. A committee was formed to evaluate restoration, and Jeremy Langford was placed under review for breach of process. As the room emptied, Olivia squeezed her shoulder. You didn't just walk back in. You walked tall. Madeline exhaled. Now comes the harder part. What's that? Going back. She returned to Lincoln Avenue that evening. As she stepped out of the car, no chauffeur, no press residents stood clustered outside staring. Mrs. Delgado was the first to approach. You look different, she said. I feel different, Madeline replied. You kept your word, the old woman said, her voice softer than usual. Madeline nodded. It's not over yet, but the eviction is canceled. The building's safe for now. Ellie came running, arms open. You're back, Daddy said maybe, but I said, definitely. Madeline scooped her up, burying her face in the girl's hair, blinking hard against the tears. Then she saw Jack. He stood behind the crowd, hands in his pockets, watching. When she met his eyes, he gave the smallest of nods. Not of shock, not of question, of quiet understanding. She walked over the noise fading behind her. You told them, he said. I did, and they listened. Some did, she said. The rest didn't matter. Jack tilted his head, studying her. So, what happens now, I don't know, Madeline admitted, but I'd like to stay, if that's still okay. A slow smile touched his lips. You don't need my permission. She looked up at the building behind them. Old bricks, cracked windows, flickering hallway lights. And yet, it was more beautiful than any tower she'd ever helped design. I'd like to help fix it, she said. Jack looked at her not like a savior, not like a CEO, but like a neighbor, a partner. Then let's fix it, he said, together. That night, as lights flickered back on in the stairwells and laughter floated through open windows, Madeline Walsh sat on the stoop beside Jack and Ellie, arms wrapped around her knees. She didn't wear a power suit. She didn't carry a title. But for the first time in her life, she was home. Sunday morning came quiet and golden. The first real sunlight in days slanted across the windows of Lincoln Avenue, illuminating dust in the air like falling stars. The old building felt different now, not newer, not better, but alive in a way it hadn't been for years. A murmur of hope buzzed through the halls, passed in warm greetings and smiles that didn't have to be forced. And still something inside Madeline remained unsettled. She stood in the mirror, brushing her fingers through her hair, staring at the woman looking back at her. This version of herself didn't wear masks. She didn't shrink to fit the room. She had faced the storm and spoken out, and the ground hadn't fallen beneath her. But there was one thing left undone, one truth she hadn't yet dared speak aloud. She turned, pulled on her jacket, and headed for the stairwell. Jack was in the courtyard repairing the wheel on a child's scooter that had been left outside all winter. Ellie sat cross-legged beside him, using sidewalk chalk to color a sun with a smiley face. Madeline paused in the doorway, watching them. Jack looked up first. He gave her that easy nod again, the kind that made her feel seen without pressure, noticed without scrutiny. "Morning," he said, wiping his hands on a rag. Coffee's still hot if you're brave." She smiled but didn't move toward the cup. "Can I talk to you?" He glanced at Ellie. "Sweetheart, why don't you show Mrs. Delgado your chalk masterpiece?" Ellie jumped up. "I made the sun look like it's laughing." She darted off, leaving a trail of pink chalk dust behind. Jack stood. "What's going on?" Madeline took a slow breath. "There's something I haven't told you. Not just you, the entire building." Jack's posture stiffened slightly. "Okay. I wasn't just involved in the redevelopment paperwork," she said. "I didn't just know who owned the building. I am the owner." Jack didn't move. "I'm Madeline Walsh," she said softly. "CEO of Walsh Holdings. Or, I was." Silence stretched between them, taut as piano wire. "I came here because I was drowning in a life that never felt mine. And when I landed in this building broke, lost angry, I didn't expect anything from anyone. Least of all, kindness. Least of all, you." Still, he said nothing. "I know how this sounds. I know what it looks like. I hid who I was. I let you think I was just another drifter. And part of me was. But the other part, the woman who signed deals without reading the fine print, the woman who almost let this building disappear, that part needed to be torn down." She looked at him, eyes brimming. "You were the first person who treated me like I mattered, even when you didn't know my name. And that's why I came back not to save this place, but to learn what it means to deserve it." Jack took a breath, slow and deep. "I figured," he said, finally. Madeline blinked. "What?" He gave a one-shoulder shrug. "Not at first. But the way you spoke, how you knew the law, the language, the way you looked at this place like you were seeing ghosts. I knew there was more. Then why didn't you say anything? Because I figured if you were running, you needed to run. And if you were healing, you needed space to do that too." She laughed, soft, disbelieving. "You really are too good to be true." "I'm just tired," he said. "Tired of judging people before they have a chance to show who they want to become." He stepped closer. "What you did this week, that wasn't a performance. That was earned. You could have disappeared again. You didn't." Madeline swallowed hard. "I couldn't. Not anymore." He nodded. Then after a beat, he asked, "So, what now?" Madeline looked up at him, voice low. "Now I stay. Not as a CEO, not as a savior. Just someone who wants to build something better." Jack's face softened. "You already have." Their eyes held for a long, quiet second that spoke of forgiveness and trust, and something new just beginning to grow between them. Then Ellie came bounding back. "Daddy, look, I made a rainbow snake and he's smiling." Jack laughed, crouching to admire her artwork. Madeline knelt beside him, her arm brushing his not on accident. "You know what she said? I think I'll draw something too." Ellie handed her a piece of chalk. Madeline looked at the blank patch of sidewalk and slowly began drawing a crooked little house. The roof was uneven, the door too small, but she colored it in like it meant something. Because it did. Jack leaned over. "What's that supposed to be?" She smiled. "Somewhere to begin." That night, Madeline stood in her apartment now, tidier, warmer, with a fresh lamp glowing by the window. On the wall hung a framed version of Ellie's three-armed woman. Next to it, a new sketch Madeline had made a sun astoop, 3 figures side by side. She sat at her desk, opened her notebook, and wrote a letter. To herself, to the company, to the people who had trusted her again. Dear Lincoln Avenue, thank you for teaching me that broken doesn't mean worthless, that lost can lead to found, and that sometimes when the world forgets to be kind, one person offering a sandwich can change everything. I came here to disappear, but I found a reason to stay. Not because of who I was, but because of who I'm learning to be. I don't know what comes next, but I know it starts here with you. Madeline. She set the pen down. For the first time in years, her name didn't feel like a burden. It felt like a promise. The first morning of January brought with it a frost so fine it clung like lace to the windows of Lincoln Avenue. But inside, warmth bloomed in the form of something better than heat hope. It had been a week since the redevelopment had been suspended, and while the formal restoration plans were still taking shape, the spirit of the building had already shifted. People who once passed each other without a word now exchanged coffee, helped carry strollers, fixed doorknobs, and repainted stair rails. Jack had dubbed it the Fix-It Winter. Ellie called it the Season of Kind. Madeline called it home. She stepped out of her apartment and nearly tripped over a box labeled Free Books. A handwritten sign taped to the lid read, "Take one," or "Leave one," or "Read out loud to someone who can't." She smiled and opened the lid. Inside were old paperbacks, children's stories, a few Spanish-language poetry collections. She picked one with a worn blue spine, the Velveteen Rabbit, and carried it with her to the courtyard. There, Jack was fixing the hinge on the community notice board. His flannel shirt was flecked with sawdust. Ellie sat cross-legged nearby, her jeans streaked with chalk drawing houses with curly smoke and stick figure people who held hands. "Back at it already?" Madeline asked. Jack looked up. This thing was squeaking every time someone posted a flyer. Figured the board deserved better. "It's funny," she said. "You fix so many things that aren't yours." "They are now," he said simply. She hesitated, then sat beside him, flipping open the book on her lap. "Do you remember this one?" she asked. He glanced over. "Ellie made me read it 100 times last winter. Could recite it in my sleep." She smiled. "Then you know the best part. They said it together. When a child loves you for a long, long time, then you become real." Their eyes met the quote hanging in the air between them like breath in cold sunlight. "I think that's what this place did to me," Madeline said. "Made me real." Jack's voice was quieter than usual. "You've always been real. You just didn't have anyone who saw it." She closed the book and looked at him. "You did." That afternoon, the first community meeting under the Kind Shelter Restoration Project took place in the basement rec room, formerly a dim, forgotten space with mismatched chairs and a leaky faucet. Now, strung with borrowed fairy lights and the smell of donated apple cider, it felt like the beating heart of the building. People came with ideas and stories, suggestions scribbled on napkins, printed diagrams from old neighborhood newsletters. A retired architect offered pro bono consultations. A young mother brought snacks for the kids. A high school student raised his hand and shyly proposed turning the rooftop into a garden. Madeline took notes the whole time. Not as a boss, not as a figurehead, as someone trying to listen and earn her place. When the meeting ended and people lingered just to talk, just to be, Madeline stepped into the hallway and let herself feel it fully. This wasn't a rescue mission. This was a renewal. Later that night, after most residents had returned to their apartments, Jack walked her to her door. "I've been thinking," he said, hands in his coat pockets. "You don't have to keep living in that freezing studio." Madeline tilted her head. "Jack?" "I'm not saying move in," he clarified, quickly sheepish. "But the unit next to ours is empty. The super's already agreed to fix the windows. It has heat. Good bones. I could help patch it up." She laughed softly. "So this is your version of a grand romantic gesture, offering me good insulation and plumbing advice." He grinned. "We fix what we know how to fix." She looked at him for a long moment, her voice barely above a whisper. "Why do you keep trusting me? Because you didn't have to come back," he said. "And because when you did, you didn't come back bigger. You came back braver." She reached up, brushing a bit of sawdust from his collar. "I don't know what this is," she said, "but I know I don't want it to end." He stepped closer. "It doesn't have to." And just like that, beneath the hallway light that flickered once then steadied, he kissed her. It wasn't dramatic, it wasn't planned, but it was real. When they pulled apart, neither of them said anything. They didn't need to. The next morning, as the city stirred back to life after the holidays, a local reporter showed up to take photos of the building. Jack stood beside Madeline on the stoop, Ellie in between them, holding both their hands. The journalist asked, "What should the headline say?" Madeline thought for a moment, then said, "Not rescued. Reclaimed," and Ellie added with a wide smile, "And there's no leftovers this time." Everyone laughed, but Madeline's eyes welled up because that line meant more than the child knew. She wasn't someone asking for scraps anymore. She was part of something belonging, giving, growing. She was no longer the woman who vanished in a wedding dress. She was the woman who stayed. The table was nothing special, just a reclaimed slab of wood Jack had salvaged from a construction site months ago. Its legs didn't match. One corner dipped slightly. The finish was uneven. But when Madeline set down the chipped ceramic plates and stepped back to take it all in, it felt like the most beautiful thing she'd ever prepared. The apartment had come to life around it. Walls now held Ellie's drawings strung together with twine and clothespins like a gallery of joy. A second-hand couch sat beneath a window freshly caulked by Jack's steady hands. The heater purred softly in the background, and in the air lingered the scent of roasted vegetables, cinnamon, and something warm enough to be called belonging. Tonight wasn't about celebration. It was about gratitude. It was about staying. Ellie burst through the door first, wearing a paper crown she'd made at school, shouting, "It's dinner time," and I helped stir the mashed potatoes, but only a little because Dad said I eat more than I stir. Jack followed with a smile and a six-pack of root beer. "Sorry, we're late. Someone stopped to tell the mailman that this building is famous now." Madeline laughed, taking their coats and hanging them near the heater. "Well, she's not wrong. We made the paper again this morning. And I think someone at the mayor's office actually said the words, 'Innovative Housing Partnership,' without rolling their eyes." Jack raised his eyebrows. "Should we frame it? I already did," she said, grinning, pointing to a tiny clipping on the fridge pinned by a smiley face magnet. They all sat at the table. Ellie climbed up onto her usual spot between them and immediately started narrating her plate. Potatoes, carrots, bread that smells like Grandma's house. And wait, is this chicken or turkey? Madeline smiled. "It's whatever you want it to be." Ellie nodded sagely. "Then it's Christmas chicken." They dug in. No toasts, no ceremony, just bites between laughter stories exchanged with easy rhythm and eyes that lingered longer than they used to. And halfway through, Ellie leaned across the table, eyes shining. "Hey," she said, mouth full. "Remember when I gave you my cookie in the rain?" Madeline looked at her with a soft, full heart. "I remember every crumb. I thought you were a fairy." Jack nearly choked on his drink. "A what?" Ellie shrugged. "You looked sad but shiny. That's what fairies are, right?" Madeline reached across the table and took Ellie's hand. "That day, you were the magic." After dinner, Jack washed the dishes while Madeline sat on the fire escape with Ellie curled against her watching the city breathe beneath a sky spangled with quiet stars. The night air was crisp but kind. "Do you miss the tower?" Ellie asked suddenly. The tall one from the pictures in the newspaper. Madeline thought for a moment. "I used to think I needed the tower to feel like I mattered," she said. "But now I know it's not how high you climb. It's who's waiting for you at the bottom." Ellie yawned and nestled closer. "You can live here forever, you know." Madeline smiled. "That's the plan." Inside, Jack dried the last plate and stepped onto the fire escape. He leaned against the railing beside her, looking out over the street where porch lights blinked on one by one, like the city tucking itself in for the night. "I fixed the heater in Unit 3B today," he said, "and I helped Mrs. Delgado write a grant proposal for the arts program," she replied. "Busy day. Good kind." They stood in silence for a moment, the kind that didn't need filling. Then Jack turned toward her. "Do you ever think about what might have happened if I hadn't shared that sandwich?" Madeline smiled. "All the time. I didn't know who you were. Didn't know what you had or didn't. Just saw someone who looked hungry." "That's still all I was," she said, "and still all I am." Jack reached for her hand. "No, you're so much more." She looked at him, at the man who never judged, who never needed credentials to measure worth. "You know what? I think," she whispered. "What I think that leftover changed 2 lives. Jack pulled her closer. Maybe 3. They kissed again, not like a story ending, but like one just beginning. Weeks later, a letter arrived from the city. The grant was approved. Restoration of the building would begin in spring with full resident involvement led by Madeline and Jack as community co-directors. No one would be displaced, no units lost. And 3 others like it across the city were now being evaluated under the same model. At the bottom of the letter, a note from the housing commissioner. Sometimes the strongest foundations are built by the people who refuse to leave. That evening, the residents gathered in the basement rec room again, this time not for strategy or crisis, but for stories. Madeline sat on the edge of the stage and read The Velveteen Rabbit to a room full of neighbors who had become family. When she reached the line, "Real isn't how you are made. It's a thing that happens to you." Her voice caught. She looked up. Jack was standing in the doorway holding Ellie, both watching her with the kind of quiet awe that never makes a sound but fills an entire room. And Madeline, once the runaway bride, the woman who vanished from marble floors and cameras, smiled through tears, her voice steady. When someone loves you for a long, long time, not just to play with, but really loves you, then you become real. And now she was. Forever. Absolutely.